Hey, there we go. Cool. How are you?
Good. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you absolutely wonderfully, and I'm very jealous of your wallpaper.
Isn't it so cool? And look at this. It's a secret door.
Awesome. I'm sold. Want one?
How are you? How's it going?
My hair is getting yay long now.
Yeah.
It's getting to the point where I'll no longer have to bother about buying wigs.
So, I was wondering if we could chat today about how you prepare for auditions, whether it's baby dog auditions or other auditions in life. Your audition for Blackpool Sounds is quite the story in baby dog films, like teen. Carl talks so much about, he talked about it in his podcast a few weeks ago, about how you came in as Dom. I was like, hi, I'm Dom. And then you were Mr.
Yep.
And then by the end, you were Phyllis. And I was saying, like, it's not, I don't know anybody. I know people with like multi-role, like reunion stuff, like you have to multi-role, it's fine, it's whatever. But I don't know anybody that does it like you. Like the minute you put that wig on, even if you weren't on stage, you just sat differently and you looked at your phone differently. And it's just amazing. I was just wondering if you could impart some wisdom to us this morning.
Oh, crikey. First of all, I would say whenever you're preparing for an audition, know who you're going to prepare for. And that's not that you'll know the actual person, it's you'll know the type of person. So I auditioned for Blackpool Sands when I was quite early on in my career as an actor. And I'd done what every new actor does, which you go on YouTube and you look at all the tutorials and you say, how do I actually cast? You know, what happens to me in an audition at a professional level? And they have like a million do's and a million don'ts. And some of them I totally agree with, and some of them I kind of looked at. Like there was one which was, when you go for a professional audition, never take props, never take a costume. And I thought, well, that's not much fun, is it? You know, what's the point of just turning up in a black t-shirt every single day, every single audition? And so when I got the invitation from Carlton to actually turn up at Hope Studios in Manchester and do an audition, first of all, I was stunned because I never thought in a million years I was going to actually be called for an audition for the advert. But I was at that stage where I was still applying for everything. But I thought to myself, right, I'll see what comes in the audition pack. And literally, Carlton's entire audition was, here's the script, make me a 5-minute monologue. And I was just like, what? And he sent the entire script for Blackpool Sounds as it was in it, sort of one of its first, second drafts. And this never, I mean, everyone who's in the acting world knows you never get the whole script ever. You might get like a page, 2 pages. And so I'm sat there with a whole script and I thought, oh, I'll give it a go. And I went through and I took some lines from my character. And I took some lines from Red Ethel's actually.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, because I read them and it was the speech she gives about how she's living life in the revolution. And you grab life and you take it. And I thought, you know what? I want those lines for this character. And so literally I thought, right, okay, I sat down and I looked at the character and I took all the lines I wanted from the script that really reflected who Mr. Elbridge was, both as Mr. Elbridge and Phyllis. And then I was thinking, but how can I really make an impact on this director? And I thought to myself, if I could actually show the transition, the change from Mr. Elbridge dressed as a male to Mr. Elbridge as a transvestite, that would be really good. And if I could do it with a little bit of a shock value as well, that might get the director's attention. And you know the rest. I turned up in Manchester, and you know how Facebook memories appear sometimes on your Facebook feed. Every November, I get a little picture of me sat on a fountain in Piccadilly Gardens, Manchester, waiting for my audition. And literally, I walked over to Hope Studios. I walked in. I sat down next to the amazing Linda Clark, who chatted to me and made me feel very, very welcome. And a gentleman who was probably 5 years older than me, who was there for the same role, who, again, really nice guy. Can't remember his name though, but really nice guy, chatted me through a few things. And then I went in, and as I did my audition piece, I began to take all my clothes off. I remember Carlton just sat there looking at me like, what are you doing? I'm not that kind of gentleman, thank you. And
Carl said in his podcast that when started undressing, he was like, did I forget that he's like a bit of a strip? Did I write something and I've not took it out of the script? Like, what's going on? I thought it was really funny. All right, carry on. So,
I mean, he was just like gobsmacked, and you know, Carlton did not look like he was gobsmacked in a good way either. He was just like, and then he sort of, I said, right, okay, I'll start getting dressed again, put in my suit, and he went, would you do that again? And he said, I just want someone to come in and watch it. And of course, it was your mum, Wendy, and she came in and she sort of watched it, and she was kind of like, and they're both sort of really polite to me and said, thank you very much for coming down. We'll let you know how it went later. And of course, I got the call sort of about midnight that night, just to say, yeah, you got it. You're in with Skint Theatre, as they were known at the time, and you're off to New York to be in a play. And I was like,
it's
awesome.
Crazy, wasn't it? Just the thought of going to New York, and it was going to be off Broadway, and just so crazy.
Completely life-changing.
Yeah, what I was going to say, what was that like for you? I mean, I feel like me and you were in similar positions. This was my first proper big thing. Very early on in your just acting career, whereas you've had a career as a teacher for years and years and years, haven't you? So what for you was it like to finally be able to be like, I'm doing it, this is happening, I'm off Broadway, I'm in New York, and it's happening?
I still don't quite believe I did it. But I probably think it's the best thing I've ever done in acting. And you know, I love doing the film work, but there's something magical about being on stage, and to actually walk out on that stage in New York and go, right, I'm here, da 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 da, and then watch my main prop ping out of my bra onto the floor behind a chair. And I just kind of went, oh. And so I sailed across the stage as I envisaged myself doing 100 times. And as I got to the big chair on stage, I sort of ducked down and plop, and popped up again. And I looked out at the audience, and everyone was kind of like going, okay, no idea why you did that, but crack on. So wasn't the best start, but I loved every second of being there. It was magical in every sense.
It was.
But
so, in terms of, obviously, I feel like Mr. Elbridge is quite a gift in terms of bold choices at auditions. There was a lot of things about him that, especially for the era that the play is set in, that were bold and crazy and nobody expected. Do you have any advice? I mean, I'm absolutely sure that you've done auditions that don't have, you know, those little moments within the character that you just think, yeah, absolutely, I'll have that, and I'll have that, and I'll do this and this and this.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice in preparing for auditions that are a little bit more normal, like the type that you would go in your nice and do your bit and then go? Do you have any ideas about standing out for those?
What I would say is audition appropriately. Now, Carlton was the writer of the piece, he was the director of the piece, he was emotionally invested in the work that was in front of him, and that meant he had time and the willingness to be emotionally invested in his actors at the audition. And we saw that with the film as well when we're at the Salford Arts Centre, how he spent so much time with certain actors because something really chimed with him. So if the person you're auditioning for is someone who's got an emotional investment in the project you're working on, brilliant. That's the time to think about taking the props in, maybe putting on a bit of costume, something that symbolises the character. If you're going in front, and I don't know how many of these you've come across over the last sort of 12 months, but if you're going in front of a full-on professional London-based casting director, they don't care.
Yeah,
they want to see this.
Yeah,
and then they're happy. And you can say, try and fit in as many personal comments as you can just to stand out.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you won't get more than a sentence or two.
So, yeah, with the professional ones, they don't want to see, really, if it's an advert, they don't even really want to see much of your acting. Yeah. I did do one sort of free casting session over lockdown with a casting director via Spotlight, and they were just like, Dom, I don't care how good you are at Chekhov. I just want to see your face, and if it fits the brief, and if it does, you'll go through to the next part of the selection process. And I've got to say, when you go through to that next part of the process, that's when you're more likely to meet the director of the piece. And that's when you can start to make everything a little bit more complex and a bit more interesting. I did have one absolute car crash of an audition over the lockdown in the summer. And it was for the role of a psychopath called Jameson. And the guy who was running the auditions was also the writer of these books. And he was going to be directing this film short, which could have been made into a TV series. And he said, right, I want a really scary psychopath. His name's Jameson. This is the character in the books. It was sort of teenage fiction, sort of Twilight type stuff. So lots of occult things in there and devil worship and demon slaying. And I read through all the pieces, and there's a bit where Jameson actually eats someone's tongue. And I thought to myself, do you know what? It's lockdown. I haven't got anything else to do. I'm going to include like ever so tiny crosscuts in the monologue I've got to say, to include little snippets of Jameson's life. And I actually made myself a tongue out of raw steak. Wow. Like shaped like a tongue, and bit into it. And literally, I have never been so sick in all my life. Some people eat steak tartare, I don't. But it's like raw steak, and it's like, so I was trying not to yak.
Absolutely.
But literally, this guy, I sent it to him, and he wrote back, and he was like, Dom, I really enjoyed that. That was great. But I'm afraid to say, you're not scary as a psycho. You're just a psycho. I want someone who's really, really scary. And he said, this guy we worked with in Australia, and he sent me a YouTube link of someone who did the role in Australia. And it was like watching a pantomime baddie. It was like, I am a psychopath that will eat your tongue type guy. Although maybe in an Aussie accent. Oh, I'm a psychopath that'll eat your tongue, mate. And literally, I just kind of watched this YouTube clip, and I wrote back to the director, and I just said, thank you very much for that, but I can't do that kind of acting. I didn't say that because I thought it was atrocious and a terrible interpretation, but it was.
Yeah.
But that's what the director wanted, and he was the writer and the director, and I just thought, no. Yeah. I've prepared my understanding of the role, and I'm not prepared to switch to something that I've got no time for, and then that I don't agree with. And that's dangerous as an actor. You can't really get away with doing that too often.
So we chatted about preparing like costume and self-tape and like what you're actually going to do. Do you have any tips on preparing the material? Now, I think this is something really interesting that I've wanted to ask you for a while, because you're obviously, what you used to be, a drama teacher, so you are well versed in all of the different types of techniques. And I was wondering if
I'd like to think so.
But so when I used to be taught about it, I'd be like, yeah, but do you actually spend time before your auditions doing this? And I've always wondered if you do, not you personally, I mean, like when my teachers would say that, but I was wondering if you do, because you taught them and you know all about them. Do you use all those techniques to prepare material?
Some of them.
Yeah.
Some. I mean, there's a lot of what I'd call Brechtian techniques, where you step outside who you are as an actor, and you sort of would do hot seating or thought tracking, stuff like that. I wouldn't use any of that.
Yeah.
I don't see where that fits into, unless you're physically working with a director.
Yeah.
And I will come back on that in a second. Unless you're actually working with a director who workshops you before the casting, then I would never ever consider using them. I'm much more of a fan of Stanislavski. Yeah. And certainly when I was preparing for Carlton, you know, I literally sat down and it was like, right, where in my life have I cross-dressed?
Yeah.
Why was I doing it at the time? What was the impulse? What was my subconscious drive to put on women's clothing at that moment? You know, and you have to go right back to when you're a small child.
Yeah.
And you're playing dress up. Now, obviously, little kids play dress up. They put on their parents' clothes. For me, you know, I grew up without a dad in the house. So if I wanted to put on grown-up clothes, it was ladies' clothes, and you know that's fine. And I was more than comfortable with that. That's not a problem. And so yeah, when I was preparing for Blackpool Sounds, that was my first stop. And then there's that crazy scene in the play. It's not in the film, but in the play, where the character starts going off into the different aspects of his feminine persona. And he's got, you know, a dowdy aunt. He's got the crazy Hellraiser lady, and he's got the very nice and prim Phyllis. And so I just looked at the different women in my lives who met those criteria and started to copy them and work with them. So for me, in the professional commercial world, absolutely Stanislavski every time. But if you've gone through drama school and you have the techniques of being able to thought track, hot seat, do a symbolic tableau or create a montage, have those techniques ready, because you never know when you're going to walk into a situation. Yeah. I met one director of a film, a guy called Vaughtray Williams, who'd worked with Ken Loach a few times. And I'm going to be honest, he was quite a cruel sense of humour, was Vaughtray. I loved him to bits, really enjoyed working with him. But literally, I turned up at this really dodgy pub just on this quite a rough estate near the Etihad Stadium. And like there was like 300 people auditioning for this film. And I'd gone for the role of Terry the Builder. And I walked in and there were like 8 guys who were all 6 foot and looked like builders, and me on the end. And I was just like, okay, this isn't going to go well. But he made us stand in a line in this big hall out the back of the pub and step forward and start thought tracking and hot seating. And I'd never done this before outside of a drama lesson. So I really enjoyed it. I thought I was having a great old time. And I went through the whole day and there were like screen tests and all this sort of thing. And the group of builders got smaller and smaller and smaller until I think there were only 4 of us at the end. And the producer walked up to me at the end and went, "We really liked you. We'll see you soon." And I was like, And then I heard nothing for 3 months, nothing. So I suddenly get a phone call out of the blue from the assistant director, a guy called Aaron, going, Dom, can you make it down to, I think it was Burnley or somewhere like that. He said, we're doing a location recce, and we just need to very quickly meet up with you again to talk about the part. And I was kind of like, oh, I thought I hadn't got it. You know, you're bringing me sort of like 4 months after the fact. And he was like, no, we really want to see you, but you've got to pop down to the car park behind this shopping centre in Burnley. I was like, oh, okay. So got down there, and I could see like a van with Optimum Films like painted on the side. And I thought, brilliant. And I could see a gang of people at the far end of the car park. And they looked busy. So I sort of stood by the van for a bit. And then this guy came running over, and he was like, are you Dom? And I was like, yeah. And he went, oh, I'm Aaron. And for some reason, he looked quite uncomfortable. I don't know why. And he took me over to meet Vautray again. And Vautray sort of looked at me and he went, dance. And I was like, what the hell? And he's like, show me you can dance. And I was like, da, 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 da. And he's like, right, go up to the assistant director, Aaron, and tell him he can't do his job properly, and be really angry at him. And like I say, Vautray has a really cruel sense of humour. And so I was shouting at Aaron in this car park, in the, you know, all these public, everyone's sort of like looking like that. And Vautray goes, yeah, you've got the job, mate. Excellent. And I was kind of like, well, I thought I had the job. You know, I've just driven 100 miles to get here. And he said, like, right, so filming days this day, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, the day came and went. I did the role, really enjoyed it, enjoyed working with Vautray. And we got to the premiere, and he actually got all the actors up in front of the screen after the premiere of the film, and he introduced them, and he had a little anecdote about each of them. And of course, you know, all the stars were at the beginning, and he had loads to say about them. And he gets down to the smaller roles, and I'm right at the end. You know, I had like 4 or 5 lines in the film. I'm right at the end, and he goes, and I'm so glad Dom made it, because I've got a little story to tell. We actually needed to get a replacement actor in. We'd cast the role of Terry the Builder, and I said to Aaron, I want Dom in the role. We didn't cast him last time, but I definitely want him in the role this time. And Aaron rang me, and there were 2 Doms. And I wasn't the one that Vautray wanted. And so he stood there and in front of this entire audience in the cinema at my very first film premiere ever. And he's going, and this is the guy we didn't want. And I'm like, oh no. As I say, he had a really cruel sense of humour. Wow. And then he turned around to me and he said, but I could not have been happier to work with you, and I would happily work with you again on any project. But when they'd seen this scruffy bloke stood near the Optimum film van, he'd actually sent Aaron over, get him away from the van before he robbed anything. So when Aaron had come over, he was like, that's not the guy I rang. Who's this guy? And so when you go back to that car park, me having to act out bollocking the assistant director, that's exactly what I was doing, just I didn't know it. So I would say for any actor, no matter how well you prepare for a casting, sometimes the role is just meant for you, and you'll get it somehow, even if you're not cast on the day with it. You know, keep your fingers crossed. It's a strange business.
That was honestly a roller coaster ride of a story. That was great.
Sorry.
But you are so right. You just got to tough it out, haven't you? It's just crazy.
Yeah. And just remember, every rejection is not personal. It really isn't. Yeah, it feels personal, but it's not.
Yeah. So we chatted about costumes and preparing for auditions and preparing material. I was wondering, just as a last little tidbit to the podcast, is there anything specifically that you do to prepare for auditions? You very clearly stand out in auditions that you go you always have something that makes you different from the rest. And I was wondering if there was anything that you do. Do you go out of your way to do things like that? Do you have any like little rituals or routines that you have before auditions? Just anything like
that? As I say, it's different depending on the level of person you're auditioning for. If they're involved in it, I'm more involved in it, which is why I enjoy it more. If they're like a distant casting director working for a casting agency who really doesn't care, then I'm going to be honest, I find it a struggle to really care myself.
Yeah.
But in terms of rituals, I would say if it's an audition where I can get emotionally invested in it, then it's very rare that the casting person will see me out of character at any point in the audition until they say, right, that's it, you're done. And then you suddenly snap out of character. And it's something that's been with me ever since I was a small child on stage. And I remember my director at secondary school, you know, said it was actually quite freaky because whatever character I'd be, and I'd always be a character, you know, I was never the leading man. I'm not a leading man face by any stretch of the imagination.
I'm not.
So I always had,
it's fine.
you know, like in Dracula Spectacular, I was the hunchback sidekick where I could, you know, use my physicality and my slightly rubbery features. And he would always say that he would look across the stage and see me in the wings, and then he'd look back and look back again, and I would have gone. And whatever character would be stood there, even if there's like 3 or 4 minutes to the character coming on stage, I would be in character 3 or 4 minutes before. And, you know, I mentioned before about sitting on by the fountain by Piccadilly Gardens, waiting to go to the Blackpool Sands audition. And, you know, I was very prim and proper. I was absolutely sort of trying out my various postures. And as I walked towards the Hope Studios, then I was getting more and more into character. But I think for me, as a sort of final thing, the epiphany of becoming Phyllis was when I walked into Hope Studios several months later. We had to do a news report somewhere near Canal Street. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yes, I know what you're going to say because I do remember us doing that.
Yeah, and I walked into Hope Studios as Dom, and I did the full makeup, the full dress, everything. And then I walked, it must have been just a mile and a half across Manchester city centre to the studio as a woman. Yeah. And the sheer terror in that moment was, as I stepped out into the public with no defence, you know, there was no one from the cast who was going to stand up for me if people started shouting abuse or attack me or anything like that. And I know it's unlikely to happen, but hate crime is hate crime. It's reported for a reason. And as I walked across Manchester with my heart absolutely pounding, I got a tiny glimpse of what genuine transvestite males go through when they share their persona with the world. And, you know, as a last little thing, I would say this: find any method you can to live what your character is going to experience in the play. Yeah. It's not always possible. Yeah. You know, I'm not saying if you're John Proctor in The Crucible, go out and get tortured. I love directing The Crucible, but there's some things you can take your actors through and some things you can't. Yeah. But I would say try and experience their life as genuinely and authentically as possible as you can, even if it's only for 1 minute or 1 mile of walking. See if you can do it.
Amazing. That's so lovely. Thank you so much for that, Dom. Thank you for joining me on our podcast this morning. I'll get it up and edited by Thursday. So Thursday you'll be able to watch it and share it with family, friends, whoever.
Absolutely wonderful. And apologies for my background changing.
I love be on taking our house tours. It's the only house viewing that I'm doing at the moment because I'm not allowed anywhere else. Thank you so much for joining me this morning, Dom. Have a lovely rest of your week.
No problem. And thank you so much for inviting me, Molly. Take care. Bye now.